Is it time to look at REITs? I mean, seriously. Because today I would like to share with you a new point of view as to why REITs may present an opportunity moving forward. I'd like to through this tutorial share an update on all the REITs, and in particular I'll be focusing on Ascendas Reit. There's a few reasons why. Firstly, Ascendas has been proven to be a well-run REIT. For many years it's been delivering dividends, and it's one that I haven't covered in a long while. Not just that, recently it did a presentation to Credit Suisse. And from there, I've actually new data to understand what's going on the REIT market that I'd like to share with you. So in today's tutorial, I'd like to address some key risks. The first is UK risk. What's going on right now in UK seems to be affecting market sentiment. I'd like to share with you REITs in general, what is affected and what is not. Second, I'd like to share with you in terms of interest rate risk. I've seen many times in the comment sections about interest rates and REITs. Let's address it yet again. And if you stay to the end, I'll be sharing with you my conclusions. So if you are keen to hear it, continue watching on. Hi guys, welcome back. Let's start with this chart over here that shows the biggest REITs. In Singapore, we have many sectors of REITs. The first is a diversified REIT like CICT, which owns offices and malls. I'll be using them to discuss a bit better. The second are pure retail mall REITs. Fraser Centrepoint Trust is the biggest of them all. Their focus is in Singapore malls, in particular those in heartlands. The third is Ascendas, which has changed its name recently to Capitaland Ascendas Reit. The fourth is actually pure commercial REITs, Cappa Reit. I didn't really circle it because I think in terms of offices, we might as well focus on what's happening in CICT. Then there's also Hospitality REIT. The biggest is one of my favorite, Ascott Reit. Ascott owns service apartments all across the world, and it's a stock that I've covered before. And last but not least, Data Center REITs. The biggest of them all is Mapletree Industrial Trust, and if you have followed this channel, you kind of know I'm a big fan of it. I know many of you guys are Cappa DC REIT fans, and so far it's been a hard journey down. So let's start with addressing the first, UK risk. Have you seen what has happened to UK or not? This picture shows 1,000 words. British pounds have fallen tremendously over the last few months. You know, currency typically it doesn't fluctuate too much. Such a drop of 20% is usually in emerging markets only, like rupiah, ringgit, Turkish lira. But right now, UK is plummeting like crazy. It's actually recently rebounded in the last few days because there were certain interventions. And speaking to here, let's start with CICT. CICT is one that owns malls in Singapore. I'm sure you've been to Bugis, Plaza Sing and Raffles City. They also own offices. So if you're thinking whether there are any offices in UK, this image actually shows where the office assets lie. They are mainly in Singapore, Germany and Australia, in particular Sydney. Now I've also seen some mention queries about the property bubble in Australia. If I'm not wrong, the biggest is actually residential property. Not that commercial property that is bad, but the bubble in particular I think is referring to the residential side. So again, CICT does not own any UK assets. So if we were to guess what's happening in UK, would it affect Ascendas Reit or not, which has UK assets? Let me show you this chart over here. In this, you can actually see Ascendas Reit, which has about 10% allocated UK assets, versus Elite Commercial Reit, which is 100% into UK assets, and Mapletree Pan Asia Commercial Trust, MPACT. Now I put out MPACT because they own assets all over Asia, so it's not even near Europe. Diversified, but in Asia. What do you realize? You see that MPACT and Ascendas have trended roughly the same, correct? Even though they may not be in the same exact sector. In my opinion, that's due to sentiment. That's due to market forces. Because when market sells, everybody drops. But what we can see quite clearly is Elite Commercial REIT has dropped way more than the other two. Take note again, this is a 6-month chart and the drop in particular has happened after August only. This shows to me that there's validity in UK risk, especially if pound drops, the value of the assets when converted to Sing dollar has to drop. But again, this is uniquely to a REIT which is 100% into UK. On the other hand, if you believe UK would rebound, then quite obviously this could look like an opportunity. It's up to your interpretation. But let's focus back on Ascendas. Over here, you can clearly see that they own logistics assets in UK. From what I remember, it was bought quite some years back, like in 2018. They've more recently moved towards data centers across Europe. So this is the general direction I'm getting when I study Ascendas Reit. So that's why there's more diversification right now and more allocations to data centers. So my quick conclusion, especially if you are a Ascendas Reit shareholder, is that UK risk affects sentiment, and unless the REIT has substantial assets in UK, I think there's not much to worry about. So hopefully that's clarified certain concerns you have, and as always, if you have benefited from some of the sharing already, help me smash the like button and press on subscribe, especially if you like contents on REITs that can help you in building up your dividend portfolio. Now with that, let's move on to the second risk, which is something commonly mentioned: interest rate risk. Now with every REIT video, I always get this question: interest rates are going up, REITs are going to crash. In fact, for this one, I'm pretty sure there'll be some who haven't even seen this section and left that comment already. But since you stick to here, let me give you the real answer so that you can think a deeper level. Ascendas Reit is one of the more prudent ones that I see. In any case, I don't own Ascendas Reit as of now. But what we can see from this presentation that's done recently is that it has 80% of its loans actually fixed. Only 20% floats. Which means the cost of debt, which is 2.1% only now, even if 20% has to increase, Ascendas Reit is not going to lose money, correct? It's just a slight drop in profitability. How much of a slight drop? This chart over here shows things. Assuming we go with the worst case scenario, 200 basis points increment of interest rates. What that means also is Fed raises from 3% all the way to 5%. Ascendas Reit, which has 80% fixed, will only see a dividend per unit drop of 4%. Which means if dividends was 10 cents, it will drop by only a little to 9.6 cents. Again, not that they are going to not pay dividends. They are only going to reduce dividends by that little bit. So if we look in terms of their dividend history, we can see that right now they are paying half-yearly dividends, correct? And a reduction of 4% would simply mean that their dividends last year of 15.258 cents would drop probably to 14.7, thereabouts, which is about the same as financial year 2020 when we had COVID and a lot of lost rent. So if indeed that situation happens, 14.7 cents in dividends with a share price now of $2.70, that would equate to 5.4% dividend yield. The first question that will come up naturally is, that's so low. If Fed raises interest rates to 5%, I might see fixed deposits at 5%. 5.4% dividend yield, I can't even cover my risk premium by taking on equity risk. There's one way to see it, or the other way, which is to see that now it's so stressed already, I can still get 5.4% from equity dividend, and yet I have potential for capital upside long term. That is how I see things. That is how optimistic investors should see things, because there's always periods of market stress and we need to get used to looking past it. I have more proof again that interest rates affect sentiment, in particular the risk premium by taking on equity, more than the actual books itself. This chart over here shows Suntec Reit, which I'm a big fan of, versus CICT, which I don't have. Suntec Reit has about 60% fixed only, but CICT has 80% fixed. That means also that CICT's performance is going to be less impacted by interest rate movement, correct? Both of them have offices and malls, and technically they look to be trending the same. But what do you notice over here is that ever since mid of September, when Fed increased interest rates, CICT seems to have sold off even more than Suntec Reit, which is weird. But that again is a very short-term capture of performance that in my opinion is still a sentiment problem. So in conclusion, I'd like to share that REITs could actually do better than tech in a rising interest rate environment because firstly, they are cash flow positive. It's not about future growth where you need to use a bigger discount rate that many of the non-profitable tech is facing. That's one thing. The second thing is that at least 50, 60 or even 80% of that is actually locked in for REITs. So hopefully that has driven a point across and helps you sleep better, especially if you see turbulence in the REITs that you own. Now since you stuck with me to here, I have a further bonus to add. And again, invite you to smash the like button. And this is the bonus that I remembered. Back then in 2008, I was a newbie investor. I got burned quite badly because some of the REITs that I owned underperformed massively. Why so? If you think back, there was a period when Fed actually cut interest rates from 5% all the way to close to zero because we had a global financial crisis, correct? And if interest rates going up would hurt REITs, then certainly cutting interest rates should benefit REITs the most, right? But that's not actually what we saw. A lot of the REITs had bad share price performance, similar to that of poorly run banks like Citibank back then in 2008. Remember again, 2008 is a credit crisis. Credit risk was huge and REITs, a lot of them had to roll debt. And that very risk of default punished share prices back then. In today's world, REITs are not going insolvent anytime. The problem we are facing now is very different from 2008. It's very easy to justify that REITs are not expensive. If you look in terms of price to book, Ascendas Reit, like many REITs, have been trending down for almost 1.5 years. Many have given up on this sector already. Price to book ratio wise, it's almost at a 5-year low, and current price to book for Ascendas in particular is 1.09 times only. Hopefully through this quick sharing you have learned something, and with that I'd like to invite you to some of my past tutorials that can help you further on REITs. This one touches on Suntec Reit, which is something I like. Or you can actually see the second one, which is on Ascendas Reit. It is in the hospitality sector, and as we know, hotel rates are just skyrocketing. But there's always fear of recession impacting tourism. So check it out also, and maybe you will find it interesting, and I'll see you there too. Take care as always. Goodbye.